Have you lost people you love, maybe more than once, and found yourself asking why and whether God is still good? Have you experienced the compound effect of grief after grief? Grief is hard and can leave you questioning God. My guest today, Deston Rogers, has had to bury multiple loved ones, and he's found a new purpose in his life, helping to inspire others out of his own grief. Welcome to the Grace Forge podcast. I'm your host, Karen Dittman, and this is a place to be reminded that when life brings the impossible, God doesn't just show up. He forges exactly what you need to walk through it. Deston, thank you for joining me today on the Grace Forge podcast. I'm excited for our conversation.
Well, Karen, I'm excited as well, and I want to thank you very much for inviting me to be a part of your podcast. I think what you're doing is awesome.
Thank you so much. I'm going to invite you to just jump right in and share with us your story of how you have seen God at work in your life through His grace.
Yes, and I was thinking about this, and just for my life, for what's happened in my life, I think God's grace hasn't been like a single incident. God's grace has been a culmination of several incidents in my life. Yet through those incidents, his presence has grown in my life. He's taught me how to learn more into my faith and believing that he is ultimately in control of our destinies, or in my case, in my destiny, in what's happening. Because I firmly believe that even though we're going through, or I'm going through adversities in my life, I've had to go through some pretty crazy trauma in my life. Despite having to go through all of that trauma, he's lined out my life for me. He's lined the path already for me. So the moment that I was born, the moment that I was conceived and born, he had everything planned. He knew what was going to happen in my life. He knew the obstacles that I was going to encounter. He already knew the trauma that I was going to have to go through. And I believe the reason why he had me go through all of those was so that I could learn, so I could learn and grow and learn to use my voice and my stories to inspire other people.
Yeah, that's so true. And I like how you said it wasn't just one thing. It's not like the light shines on us and then we walk in it forever. It's more like we have to continue to lean and trust in what we've learned before as we continue because life has its ups and downs, its ins and outs. These difficult things and trauma can hit us at any point, can't they?
Yeah, and sometimes I think, well, why can't it be just one moment, just like you said, oh, just a bright moment, and then we can go on, right?
Mhm.
But for me and for each of us, our paths are different. So we've got
Right.
to go down the path that God's lined out for us.
Yeah. So, can you tell us a little bit? Because I know your story involves a lot of grief in your family. Can you go into that for us a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So my first experience with truly having to go through grief was when my son, who was 2.5 years old, and his mother were tragically killed in a car accident. We were not together at the time. She was with somebody else. And I'll tell you about the accident. And so it was a Saturday. I recall that the time was around 10 o'clock in the morning. It was August 25th, 1990. And I was doing my normal stuff. I get a phone call from one of my coworkers at work. I was working in radio at the time. And all I got was, there's been an accident. You're supposed to call this hospital and talk to the CHP officer. So I immediately, my world's already starting to shift because I hadn't heard exactly what's going on, but I knew something had happened. So I called down and I reached the CHP officer. And what had happened was they were traveling, they were going from where they were living to her hometown, which is about an hour and a half away. And my son had gotten out of his car seat. And so, in an effort to put him back in his car seat, his mother took her seatbelt off, and instead of pulling over, they she turned around to try to put him back in the car seat. In doing so, the driver of the vehicle was distracted. He was concerned about what was going on behind him. So what had happened in that time is he had allowed the vehicle to drift off the roadway. And the reports suggested 70 to 75 miles per hour. So
Yeah.
by the time he realized he had drifted off the road, he overcorrected and the vehicle overturned. And both my son and his mom were immediately ejected out of the vehicle. And as you can imagine, 2.5 years old, there was no way he was going to survive that accident. It was a
Right.
horrific accident. His mother did survive, just barely enough to make it to the hospital, but she succumbed to her injuries. So in the vehicle, I think this is really important. In the vehicle at the time also was an infant. And at the time, I was, we were going through a paternity test to determine if he was my son. And so he was luckily with seatbelted in, only got minor injuries. The driver got minor injuries. And so the accident happens. So we bury them. Now keep in mind, there's a lot of time that's happened between when the infant and I reconnected
Hmm.
because the paternity test came back negative that he was not my son. And so it was one of those deals where I had to have the results as fast as I could because there's a child involved here. And so when I got the news, it's how do you explain that feeling? You've got a child now, all of a sudden he's not your child anymore, right? So I had not seen him from 1990 until my dad passed away, which is 2008. So all those years I'd never seen him again. My father's funeral, we're making arrangements for that. The child's aunt reaches out to me and says, "Hey, his name is Dakota. Dakota would like to meet you." And I said, "Sure, of course, why not?" Then the first time we had connected in over 30 years that we'd connected. He's 18, I think, at this time. So we reconnect. I give him the police accident report, all of that stuff, and we reestablish a bond. We got to a point where he's calling me dad, I'm calling him son. We're good. March 1st,
Hmm.
he's in his 30s at this time. I was working at the same radio station I was working at when my first son passed away. I was listening to a scanner and I heard a call about an EMS being sent out to this job location. And I said, man, that sounds right where my son's working. It was 15, 20 minutes later, I get a phone call from his best friend to say Dakota was found deceased at his job site.
Oh my goodness.
So they couldn't get a hold of him. They sent somebody out. By the time they got out there, he was already deceased. Alcohol poisoning was the cause of his
Okay.
accident. So those are two incidences in my life where trauma really hit me. Sometimes I don't even know how to explain it, but when my first son Cody passed away and his mom, to be at the same radio station that my second son passed away at when I was at. As soon as I get that phone call, my mind immediately went back
Right.
to August 25th, 1990. Those feelings, those emotions immediately come back. And when I'm asking the question, I think a lot of people would ask, right? And it's like, why? Why do I have to go through this a second time?
Right.
Why do I have to bury a second son? So those are two circumstances where I really had to really lean into faith, family, and friends to get through.
Yeah. That is heavy. That is heavy.
Yeah, yeah. And then in between that time, my father had passed away. He was found dead. He built a trailer park in California, and he was found laying on the front of a mobile home, laying on the grass, deceased. So we had that. And then me and my other three brothers, so there's four of us, my mom got cancer. Her dying wish was that all four of her kids be present when she passes away. So we rearranged it. And so we also had to watch our mother take her last breath at
Hmm.
that time. So all of this I'm having to deal with the two sons dying, my father being found dead, and then my mom watching her take her last breath. So there's a lot of grief, there's a lot of trauma in there to try to process.
So, where do you connect with God in the middle of all of this grief and pain?
I'll be honest, it wasn't at first. It,
Yeah.
it wasn't at first. When my son Cody, my first son, passed away, I was just getting into faith at that time. And so over the course of time, especially when it came to my second son, by that time, my faith had grown even stronger. So knowing that there was a reason why they were taken, right? I don't have the answer. I don't know what the answer is. I may not know that answer until my end, whenever that is, till I connect. But I knew that God had a reason for taking them. He needed them. He needed these angels for a particular reason, so he called them up when they were needed. For Cody and his mom, maybe if they had survived the accident, it would have been terrible for them. So he said that's not going to happen. For Dakota, he was going through a lot of internal trauma.
Hmm.
Never got to know his mom, never got to know his brother. Living in a small town, all the rumors, all the talking, all this stuff going on. So he was dealing with a lot emotionally as well. And so I think of his death as God was saying, he's suffered enough. He's
Hmm.
gone through enough. It's time for you to come home. And for me, when we laid him to rest with his mom and his brother, that's where he was buried. To me, that was like they have finally been reunited. They have finally been able, they're now as a family. They're connected, and God has called them together, and now they're together. So faith from that point on has been my guiding strength. It really has. If I don't know what I would have done had I not leaned into faith, understanding God and being around people who also understand God, who could say, lean in a little bit harder, dig
Hmm.
in a little bit deeper.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things I'm aware of, and I teach a lot, is that we need our community. We need to surround ourselves with the people who support us, cheer us on, understand what we're going through. And so it's good that you had those people around you.
Yeah, and that's something I talk about often is our community. Who is it that we're hanging around with? Who are the people that are influencing our lives, right? I was lucky in that I didn't have a lot of people around me that were trying to, not in a bad way, but were trying to say, I didn't go down the road of drinking or leaning on substances. Although that was offered,
Hmm.
I had people say, take this, this will relax you. I was prescribed antidepressants at the time, but I refused to take them because I did not want to go down that road. I did not want to be one of those that got addicted to something like that to get me through it. That's not what I wanted to get me through it. It was my community, as you just talked about, the community, the family, the friends, that what I leaned on that got me through it.
Yeah. So I imagine a lot of it was just people being able to be present and listen to you and let you process your own emotions as you needed to.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you know what's interesting? When I decided to start opening up
Mhm.
more about what had happened and starting to be on podcasts and talking more about that. I don't know, this might be crazy, but I've been divorced twice, but I was married at the time that my first son had passed away. And so, ironically, I said to myself, I wonder what I was like because I didn't remember that. I didn't know what I was going. I knew what I was going through, but I didn't know what I was like at that time. So I reached out to her and I said, "Hey, so I'm going to talk about this." I said, "Can you help me?" And she was gracious enough and she said, "Yeah, what can I help you with?" And I said, "What was I like? What was I doing? I don't remember. All I remember was getting a phone call. I didn't remember anything prior to that, exactly what I was doing." So leaning into her, she helped me guide me through some of the time and made me realize what I was like during that time because I didn't remember that stuff. All I
Mm.
remembered was my son dying and trying to deal with it. That's what I remembered.
Yeah.
So when we talk about being able to lean into family and friends, she guided me. She says, "This is what you were doing." The day that my son died, she goes, "Do you recall what you were doing?" I said, "I have no clue. I don't remember." And she says, "You were outside." This is funny. She goes, "You were outside. You were mad because you were fighting with the lawnmower and you couldn't get the lawnmower started." And I'm like, "I was." She was like, "Yeah, you don't remember that." I said, "I don't remember that." And she says, "Yes." And she goes, "And I told you there's a reason. For some reason, you're not meant to start that lawnmower." And it was at that time when I got the phone call when my
Mm.
son passed away. But being able to reach out to somebody like that who is willing to say, to be honest and say, this is how you were, that's what friendship is. That's what a good community does. It says, hey, yeah, this is what you were like at that time.
Yeah. And I think good community and good friends also call us forward, saying, I know that this is hard and there is hope for you down the road without making it a platitude, but people who can say, we've walked it before too. I'll hold your hand while you walk it.
Yeah, exactly. And she had to go through her own tragedy. She experienced the loss of her dad and her brother to a tragic accident. So not only did my accident happen, then she later on in life, she had to go through that part of it. So she had to go
Mm,
through that. And we stayed in touch. We've stayed in touch. And just because it's good to reach out to friends
yeah,
that can remind you, like you said, of that you've got a strong community to lean on.
yeah, yeah. So, grief. I'm aware that grief can compound as we are walking through multiple deaths or multiple seasons of grief in our lives. And you've had tragic, sudden things in addition to the expected, like when your mom passed. But what would you say to somebody who feels like, not just one more thing, please? I can't do one more thing. What would you say to someone there?
Well, simply because I've had to go through it, just know that you may not have the answer right away. When you ask that question, why one more thing?
Yeah.
Maybe it's just simply going, what's the lesson I'm supposed to learn? What am I supposed to be learning through this that is going to carry me on? Because there's got to be a lesson. There's got to be a reason to be going through what you're going through. Whatever that is you're going through. Everybody's life is different. Everybody's tragedy or adversity is different. But whatever that is that you're going through, know that there is a reason for that. And try not to always look at the negative side of it. What is the positive that can come out of this adversity that you're having to struggle through?
Yeah. And we do. We want to find a purpose for our pain, don't we? Yeah.
We do, right? And we want answers.
Yeah.
We don't always, here's the craziest thing, we don't always get the answers that we want, right?
Right.
I want the answer to this, but that answer may not be the answer you're going to get because I do believe, like I meant before, God directs everything. So his answer for you may not be the answer that you want, but it's the answer that you need.
Yeah. And so often, like you said, we want to ask why this person or why this situation? And I'm not sure that is quite the right question to ask.
No,
But
I agree. I
yeah,
agree. But we do it, right?
yeah,
Because we do want
we
to know
do.
that. We do know we want that answer.
Yeah,
It may
that's right.
not, it may be just be, like I said, what am I supposed to learn from this? What am I supposed to gain from this to help other
Yeah,
people?
right.
I think
Yes.
that's the part of it too, is why are we going through this? Why did I have to go through losing two sons and their mom and watching my mom take a last breath and my dad? And why? And I think that's simply for me, it's simply because God has a purpose for me. He has a reason why he wanted me to go through all of this. And to me, now I think I've found that reason in that my voice is what God gave me. God gave me a voice to use for over 40 years in radio. That's what he gave me. So now I get to take my voice and use it to serve other people by bringing their stories to life so their stories can help inspire other people.
Yeah. So let's talk some more about that because you've got your podcast, Ego Freedom Presents, and you are letting people share their stories too. So tell me more about what you're doing there.
Yeah, so the idea for the podcast actually came around about 7, 8 years ago when I thought about doing it. It's like an idea, you get an idea and it's, oh, that's cool. And I'll just go put it up on the shelf and that's where it stays.
Yeah.
But about a year ago, I was in a position with circumstances in my life that had happened. And I was to a point where are you going to do this or not? That I was given the time. I think God gave me some time to bring this to life. He said, okay, I've taken all this from you. I'm giving you some time to build this. And so I decided, yes, I'm going to do this. Now, it didn't happen right away. You do a podcast, you come up with the idea, but it takes a while to get it off the ground. How do you
Mhm.
do it? How do I formulate what I'm going to do? What stories? How do I look for all that? And one day I was just sitting there and I was just thinking, I really want to do a podcast that inspires other people, that causes them rise, that inspire and overcome. And all of a sudden it dawned on me, it's like rise, inspire, and overcome. There it is. There's the idea. And so the idea to encourage people to tell their stories because everybody has a story. Everybody may not have a tragic story like I've gone through, but everybody's got a story, right? And so I said, why not use my voice, my experience, my trauma that I've all gone through, because I can relate to so much that has happened, and give people a platform to feel relaxed, to be vulnerable, because that's another part of it. It's being vulnerable. It's telling your story, but yet realizing that your story can have a huge impact on somebody else who just needs to hear something that you're saying.
That is so true. And I love how you mentioned being vulnerable because we want to hide these things. We want to be like, no, I really don't want other people to see that. But when I open up and I share vulnerably about the things I've been through and what you've done today too, somebody else will hear that and go, I'm not alone.
Yeah, and I think what happens is for me, for so long, I had this facade going on that everything's okay. When my first son passed away, I remember it wasn't even a week and I was right back at work. And my second son, when he passed away, I think it was about a week, and then I went back to work. Just putting on this facade that I'm okay, I'm fine, I can make it through this, but then realizing that it's okay not to be okay.
Yeah.
That's it. It's okay not to be okay. And being
Hmm.
vulnerable is a huge part of it. But it's also one thing that I've found is that it's also therapeutic for me
Yeah.
because hearing other stories and being to share stories, to talk about it, to not live in the past like it's a bad thing, but live in the past like it's a learning lesson.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I've loved about doing this podcast too, is that it's just beautiful hearing these stories and seeing that people are overcoming and inspiring others with their stories and constantly pointing to the power of God in their lives.
Yeah. And again, leaning on the faith. One thing that I've really grown in faith, especially over the last year and a half, 2 years. And no matter where I've gone, I've been to several different places in the last year, lived in different locations. But one of the constants that I've had in that whole time frame is no matter where I went, for me, I had to find a church that I fit in, that I felt with. So even if I was visiting somebody for a few weeks or something like that, I'd ask, is there a church nearby? Do you recommend a church? And I would do that. So church has been my guide and my strength. If I miss church on a Sunday, it sets me back in a way because it's
Mm.
like my recharge for the week, knowing that I don't know what I've got going on the next week. I don't know what's going to happen, but at least I can start knowing that I started in church, started with my faith and my family, my church family, to start the week off.
Yeah, that's so important. And yeah, my husband and I we were part of a house church for a while that closed, and it's been over a year. And finally, we feel like we're connecting with a local church. But yeah, there's just that something that's been missing. And when we go to church, and then even if we're not active and serving and whatever, just being there and being present and hearing God's word and worshiping, it's so good for our souls. So even if it's not a church, like you said, you're traveling, not a church that you're attending for all the time, but it's still good to connect with God and hear the word and worship and connect with the people there. It's,
Yeah. And so many times it's not necessarily the church, but it's sometimes you go and there's the message that's being said and you go, man, I needed that message today. Right.
yes.
Right.
yes.
I needed, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. So, how can people find out more about your podcast and everything that you're doing?
Yeah, simply everything I do is under Eagle Freedom Presents, all of my social media. You can go to eaglefreedompresents.com. There's my blogs on there with all the podcasts that I've done. So it's really easy to find it. Eaglefreedompresents.com is probably the easiest way to get in connection with me. And if you know somebody, or if you yourself you're watching this and you go, I've got a story, feel free to reach out. Just email me at eaglefreedompresents@gmail.com. Say, hey, I heard the podcast and I want to talk to you a little bit more about my story. Reach out. Maybe we'll connect, maybe we won't, because not everybody's story will fit. But the point is we can still make contact and we can still establish a relationship just to say hi.
Right. That's wonderful. Great. So, Destin, I'm going to ask you if there's one takeaway you would want people to leave this conversation hearing, what is that one thing?
That's the same thing I leave with my podcast, and that is you too can rise, inspire, and overcome. You can rise. If you look at rise, inspire, and overcome, rise, each one of those are action words. So you have to do something. So rise, you just simply got to get up. Inspire is your story, even though you may think it's an insignificant thing, your little story can inspire somebody else. And then by going through all of this, you can overcome your obstacles. Just know that there's a community out there willing and able to support you.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for your time today, Destin.
Well, thank you, Karen. Thank you. And I love what you're doing with your podcast, and I send you blessings that it continues to grow worldwide for you.
Thank you so much. I think what really stood out for me as Destin and I talked was how important it is to have others we can share our stories with. Because we all go through really hard and traumatic stuff in life. And it's easy to think, I'm alone. I have to just live with this. No one else would understand. Let's just call that what it is, a lie. When we share our stories, we discover that we're not alone, and maybe what you've gone through can inspire someone else, and we can be vessels of God's grace for one another. The truth is that none of us get through this life without grief and disappointment. So let's walk through it together and give each other hope. And that's it for today. Until next time, whatever you're going through, remember this: the grace that you need is already being forged.